All right, so we should be live now. Just give me a second here.
Yes, the
Sure,
ticker is running.
yes, sir. Just gonna make sure.
Good morning, everyone. While Michael figures out the
Yes.
technical side, I'll just
That's
say hello.
it. See? That's why I invited you guys. All right, just making sure here.
I'm getting notifications saying you're live here and you're live there.
Yeah, I'm trying to
Facebook, we're
see
live. Live Talk
Instagram.
Live.
Yeah, I'm trying to see Instagram here because there's this kind of like ghetto thing. It's called the yellow. Oh, I think I got it there. Okay. So I think should be on Instagram now too. Just bear with me. This is Life Talks. This is real stuff. We don't. These are real conversations. Get behind the scenes.
Yep.
Live Talks Live. Show number 1.
That's
Yep.
it.
First 5
Not
minutes,
coming
just
up.
Michael setting up.
Yeah, I don't know why. Yeah, it's not coming up. All right, it's fun. We'll rock. What's going on, everybody?
Proceed.
So, welcome to episode 1 of Life Talks Live. Wanted to continue to build this out. I want to do this weekly, and my goal is to continue to have guests when I have more people on here, and it'll give me an opportunity to interact with you guys. So, feel free to be in the comment section. And I don't know where this is going to go. Like a lot of the other videos, when I first started this channel, it was very much I just want to have deep conversations, and now it's more Christ based. But as I say in a lot of my videos, I don't want to be a preacher. I'm not here to be preachy. And that kind of leads me into the first topic. But before I get into that, which will be speaking to the younger version of ourselves. But before I dive into that, I want to give you guys a minute to introduce yourself. So, Daniel, I know we did a podcast on here before that people can see.
Yep.
Maybe you can just give a short introduction of who you are, what you do.
I am Daniel P. Riley, author and owner of whimsyland.org, literary coaching and services. I help writers perfect their craft and edit books, bring the story to life in every way that I can.
And Jonathan.
Name's Jonathan Yopini. First and foremost, warrior of God. Secondary, I'm a husband and father to 2 beautiful boys. As you can see on my little headline or subline there, Total Wellness Adventures is just something that I started. Offer some coaching for dads, men, just trying to unlock their true potential. Really, every single one of us has greatness, and we're not tapping it, and we need to take daily action. Like Daniel is huge on consistency, and he's one of the most consistent guys that I know, and it's pushed me to be more consistent in every single aspect. So being a dad, and all the dads out there, like, trying to figure out what the heck to do with the little amount of time you have and where to find that time is huge. So I just try to help dads find time to do the important stuff. I have my 5 F's, right? Fitness, family, faith, finances, and friendships. So build on those, forge those, and that's what it's about.
Well said. I love the 5S.
Yeah, man. It's awesome.
So I kind of want to bring a little fire, as far as why I'm doing this. And, 2020 hit, And one of the things on my mind has been basically how many lies there have been, how much corruption there has been over the past few years, and then trying to find that place where it is. You just see so much disconnection. You had half the population basically worried about a virus, and then you had the other half where I feel like I was, where it's like worried about government, and the control. And what I like about your guys' stories is that you did not just follow the herd. And what I like even more, and this is what's so hard. This is what I really entered this arena because it's so hard to really be that peacemaker, to be able to speak that truth and bring both sides together. That's damn hard. And you see,
Mm.
Christ was the example of that, and look what happened to him. And what I loved is that I found people, not that they were anti-vax or vax, anti-vax, mask, that they questioned authority. And I think that is a deeply Christian principle, that you shouldn't just trust someone because they're in a position of authority, that they're not just a priest, right? Or they are a doctor, trust the science, or that they are whatever. Any authority should be questioned, because I think true authority comes from within, right? So, um, Daniel, I want to start just with sharing your story with that. Whatever you would want to tell, whatever you're comfortable sharing with that.
Oh, the quick
As
version.
well, whatever. I mean, it doesn't have to be quick. This is Life Talks, baby. It
Oh,
can be whatever
the
you want.
long version will take like a whole hour.
Well, yeah. So then, yeah. But if you could just kind of share that, because I think a lot of people were worried. Well, what if I lose my job? What if this? What if that? And a lot of people, I would say, people who believed the vaccine, cool. If you did your research, that was the decision you made, cool. But for people who didn't, that wasn't so cool for a lot of people, and they were threatened with a lot of things. So maybe if you can just share your story, because I think it's one of inspiration that you follow your gut, and cool things happen.
Thank you. Well, cool things happen because I put in the work. Uh,
Yeah.
the quick version is that I did lose my job. We'll abridge it. Basically, about when the vaccine was really being pushed, there was an email that went out in the company. I won't go into any great detail. In the company with a sign-up sheet. And the sign-up sheet came with a little note that basically said this is mandatory. And I refused to sign it. I refused to sign it for weeks. They started to get very angry with me for not signing it. And then one of them, the higher up in the building, put my name down on the sign-up sheet without my permission. Just put my name in a time, didn't send me an email, didn't talk to me face to face, didn't discuss it, just signed me up. So I went in to the document, removed my name, and went back to work. That was my first passive resistance of the whole thing. And when that forced the actual discussion, which was, why'd you take your name off the list? I don't agree with this. I don't think it's right. And I definitely don't think you should have put my name down on it without talking to me first. And it went from there and rolled downhill a little bit. I think there was a 2-week period where neither of us knew where to go from there. And then all of a sudden I got the suspension without pay notification. And I had to pursue it with a totally different individual higher up. So I had to go to a main office and work through it for a couple of weeks of back and forth via emails and whatnot. And I still have them. I keep them in a folder just to every once in a while review how ridiculously weird the corporate world is. And particularly when it comes to education, because that was the field. And then I got a opportunity to plead my case, which was veiled as a sit down with the superintendent. But when I showed up, it was a firing squad panel of the entire board. And I was alone. No representation. It was me on one side of a room and 6 other people on another side of the room. And the superintendent, literally, I'll show you what it would look like. He was doing this the whole time.
Super engaged.
Yeah, power move style. So I sat there and I listened to the start of it all, and they were discussing everything. And then this other person gets up and he's, announces himself as representation. So he was a lawyer, and he starts going through these legal sides of this stuff. And I went, I'm not going to waste anybody's time, particularly mine. So you guys make your decision and let me know. And I left. Like, I'm not going to try to plead my case to people who obviously don't want to hear it. And they were prepared to sort of bludgeon me with stuff that I wasn't prepared for. The legal side of it all. I understand that there is a CYA sort of aspect to these things when it comes to larger companies and education systems, but
What's CYA?
cover your ass.
Okay.
Yeah. So I understand that these things are standard procedure for them, but the lack of transparency on it was the part that really annoyed me. And at any point in this process, this had gone on for weeks. So it was probably about 2 months of pay I'd lost. And at any point I could have just said, fine, and went back to work. And most likely if I had, they would have never batted an eye and I would still be working there. But all of my personal research, all of my belief was that this thing was not safe for me. I'm, at the time, not so worried about everybody else. It was more of a personal thing for me. I have a daughter. I was hearing stories about people in my age bracket that were having issues with what seemed to be reactions to these vaccines. And these were the concerns that I expressed, both with my immediate supervisor when they actually spoke to me and with the representative from the main office. Neither of them heard. Like, totally not interested. So I walked out and I got served my notice, I think 7 days after that meeting.
What are
in
you
the mail.
thinking in that period of time? Because I would say most people would be like, what the hell am I going to do? I got a kid. What, how am I going to
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Like, so all that's going on, right?
I think I had maybe, if I'm lucky, I think I had maybe $2,000 saved up. Especially after 2 months of being on unpaid suspension. So it was a rough time, but it also, I had wanted to do this coaching thing. I wanted to help other writers like I had been doing, because I've been writing in the interim around the job and enjoying the process. So once I got over the initial shock, it was, well, what am I going to do now? And that's a powerful question. What are you going to do now? What's next? And that one I have to give my stepfather. No matter what I do, I could go over there for family meal and be like, I made $1 million in a month. And I was on this show, I was on that show, and he'd look across the table at me and go, okay, what's next? In same tone of voice too.
Yeah.
Have you cleaned your gutters? That's the kind of guy he is. So that was what was in my mind. It was, what do I do now? Job's gone. where do I go from here? And much like the writing, which is something I hadn't done, all my life, I wanted to be an author, but I just didn't pull the trigger on it for various reasons, mostly excuses. But after doing that, I had the thought in my head, if I can write a book and get it published, if I can write 2 books and get it published, if I can write 4 books, I have like 7 now. I can do anything. So what do I do now? And that's where Whimsyland came from. Turning a dream into a reality.
Yeah, well, I think I've spent a lot of time thinking about validation. So, and how, you have people who are kind of on the cold end where they're like, I don't need anybody like me, right? And then the overly, I need to be included by everybody. Please like me. And I've kind of come to the place where it's like, we should be validating good moral behavior. And I think that, to me, that was one of the biggest reasons why I respect you, because because this is what this whole journey has brought me to, is to forge my words better as I make these videos, which is that you had the courage to follow what you believe up against 9 people who were against you, but you followed and chose Daniel's path to the extent that you saw what you saw. And that's, to me, the word that comes to mind 2020 and 2021 was just subversive. Like, just seeing how manipulating and how people are being pulled on emotional heartstrings, and how, it's just seeing the kind of snakes out there. That's what led me also to go within myself, because I know that I'm a hypocrite. I've lied in my life, and seeing it, just having inclinations and realizing, like, no, there's people with billions and trillions of dollars who have influence, who don't give a shit about. We're just numbers on the bottom of a screen to people out there. And, and how do you fix this problem? Well, a lot of people, including myself, were just like, well, we have to fix it out there. But, the fix is right here. Yeah. And what came to my mind as you're sharing that is, there's this Gandhi scene in the movie Gandhi, where there's something, because I think you had mentioned passive resistance, right? There's the idea of, and I have a book on it, nonviolent resistance. I don't know where it is here. Yeah, oh yeah, here it is. It's by Gandhi. It's right on the top shelf there. Nonviolent resistance. And again, like, there's going to be people like, Gandhi this, did you hear about Gandhi's past? And I went through that, but I'm like, I can't believe Gandhi did this.
Everybody has a past, man.
Yes, but what I do love, there's a scene in that movie. I know it's a book, but in the movie, where he shows up with no defense in the movie, and he was a lawyer, but at this time he's got, like, his shawl on and all that. He's going the path, and he says, do you have defense? He goes, no, I'm guilty as charged. And if you believe in the law that you administer in my country, I would like the harshest penalty you have possible. And I remember getting goosebumps seeing that for the first time, because it was just like, no, he's basically exposing them. He's saying, if you believe in what you believe, bring it, because there's no winning this game. It's an unfair game. So the best thing I can do is go out swinging, and it's like a higher level of consciousness swinging. So
for me, it was more a statement without having to actually make a statement. I just removed my name from the list and went back to work. Like, I worked for a couple of days afterwards. Nobody said a damn thing. And to me, that was, I don't agree with this, but I'm still here to do the job. That was my little passive, resistance moment. Afterwards, when it became something where we had to have a discussion, I defended myself verbally, face to face. And that was harrowing. Both individually, sitting down across from somebody who I don't really know, who's trying to convince me to do these things, and then in front of all those people in that conference room. It's a whole different thing. Like, college students get a little bit of public speaking, and they get their feet wet in the concept of talking in front of others, but it's a whole nother animal when you've got every eye in the room looking at you from the other side of it.
Yeah, you're the enemy. You're the other. And you know what? What I think about too is that it's. I'm sure there's this feeling because I've felt this like in my core is that there's something about it, the pain of being misunderstood.
Mm,
Like, and I think that with Christ, that's the transcendent pain, right? That you to transcend that, that's real, true spiritual growth. That forgive them, they know not what they do. Is that essentially you're dealing with people who I'm sure most of them, if not all of them, were sitting there saying, no, this is common sense, right? That we're trying to protect other people from this virus, and like, why would he be like they're not they're not seeing the bigger picture. They're not seeing that like, no, this is wrong. You have no idea what they're not. They're just in kind of that herd mode mentality, not questioning
yeah,
things. Right?
I can't say that for sure, and
Yeah,
that's part of the thing about it is uh, what you were saying about miscommunication. There is a lot of people nowadays have this tendency of trying to assume what's in someone else's head. I just deal with what comes out of their mouth. I'm not trying to figure out whether or not you understand what I'm saying. I'm waiting to hear, what did that mean? Can you explain that to me? If you don't ask, I don't tell.
yeah,
And I think that works better, at least for me. It may not work for everybody, but the the presumption that we know what's going on in people's heads creates a lot of the strife that goes on now, especially with social media, because it's even worse. You look at a person, sometimes you can see on their face that they're upset. You can see on their face that they're angry or sad or, having a good day. You see that person with a big smile on their face and you're like, nice, as they're going by. And that brightens your day a little bit for some reason. I don't know why yet. Still trying to sort that one out. But every time I see somebody who's genuinely happy, I'm a little happier.
yeah.
It's a really strange phenomenon. But on social media, on the internet, you've got a name and a picture. So you have less context than a face-to-face conversation. And yet we still assume that we know what's going on in each other's heads. It's bizarre, isn't it?
What's that energy, right? Like, so in person, you really do have a human vibration about you, and it ripples. At least this is what I believe. And when you are exuding, you know, some might say positive energies like happiness, joy, love, like it really does. It ripples out into the world. It's that butterfly effect. Same holds true on the opposite end of the spectrum. You
Yeah.
have negative emotions. You bring down, like, you walked into a workplace before. I'm sure we all have, and like you just get this feeling like, oh, this is
Nobody
not
wants to be here.
yeah, this is not where I want to be.
Yep. Absolutely.
And it's one of those things that I try to be very mindful of, like where my thoughts are, because I reflect on that often, that whole, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. And that's usually my first thought when faced with things like with the vaccine, for instance. I work in healthcare. Like, yes, I do the
Yeah,
wellness
share your
coaching
story
side.
real quick, like kind of what you want because you're at what
Yeah.
you want to share.
Sure, yeah. So I'm a nurse. I'm a neonatal ICU nurse, and you know, global. They were coming down pretty hard with the vaccine mandates. Um, I was fortunate enough to write out a religious exemption and get it approved. But along that path, there was a lot of uncertainty. Very similar to Daniel, I have kiddos as well. I have two young kiddos, and I am primary breadwinner in the household. So I was looking at contingency plans. Would I have to move, because I'm currently in California? So would I have to move to let's just say, different state that respects bodily autonomy a little bit more? And that would have been huge because our whole family's here. So it was a lot of decisions, but it was the first time in my life where before, I mean, talking about like validation and people pleasing, like that was me. I was actually just having this conversation with a buddy over breakfast yesterday. That was me. I I was Mr. Nice Guy. I was the people pleaser. I was the person that would put on a mask to fit into every situation, and I would bend my values and principles, sometimes downright break them in order to make people feel good. And, you know, they would feel good, but 30 minutes after the interaction, I would not, because I just went completely incongruent with the man that I know I need to be. I know I want to be. So that whole period a couple years ago was the very first time that I said, okay, here's my line in the sand, and I'm not crossing it this time. Like, darn with the repercussions. Like, and it was hard, and there was a lot of there's a very small, as you can imagine, a very small group of us on my unit that were fighting against it and not going to get vaccinated. So it was a very lonely time, and there was a lot of negativity talking about the negative environment. Whew, that was a rough time because, in healthcare, everyone gets stickers on their badges, like if they get a particular vaccine, and you would have a sticker on your badge.
It's wild. Did you see the Seinfeld clip?
That's the way it works, though, dude. Yeah, I mean, no, I haven't seen it. I mean, I probably have, but
yeah,
yeah,
Did
it
you see
really
it, Daniel?
was.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry,
And
to cut you off. Yeah, keep going.
you're good, dude. And there was a period where you want to talk about Scarlet Letter. There was a period where there's different masks, so like surgical masks and N95s, and I'm sure everyone knows about all the different masks now.
Now,
yeah. There was a period where we had to wear a special mask, an N95 mask, where everyone else that was unvaccinated could wear a regular surgical mask. So you could tell who was unvaccinated versus vaccinated. And like, if you actually dive into this science, yeah, we'll just leave it at that. But it was essentially like Scarlet Letter.
Oh yeah. Social conditioning is crazy, man.
Oh, I know. Yeah, and that's exactly what I was thinking the whole time, because like prior to this, like I enjoy it. I'm kind of a geek. Like, so I've dove into some of the old school studies and like on social conditioning and all that stuff. And I was like, oh man, and like influence tactics and whatnot. Cialdini like wrote on it, and I was like, oh man, like I was just sitting back and like, I know exactly what you guys are doing. Like, like every step of the way, I'm like, I know your tactics.
I think that's
Like,
what the 40 days and 40 nights really is about, because you have to be alone with, like, there has to be a process that you can completely stand alone. Like, that's why and I didn't say it as well, like when Daniel, what you were saying essentially is that you can't assume what other people are thinking, but that thinking mind that's going on within you is going on within most people.
Oh,
Why
yeah.
are you doing this? What, and to overcome that is really, it's allowing all those thoughts and being like, I'm not this thought, I'm not this thought, and peeling back those layers, because then you can that willingness to be completely, you don't care what other people think, but it's not I don't care what you think. It's like, because I know what that mind is, and it's like you can't fake that. Like, you can, we do our best, right, until we overcome that, and I think that's that shift from personality to character.
Yeah, there's a little bit of I've been where you are in those sorts of situations. And there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people get self-conscious about being the odd one. That's another thing that's been socially conditioned into us, that anybody that 20, 30 years ago, entertainment would celebrate that. You would see all these, quirky programs and TV shows about people who saw the world slightly differently. And, that was what you went on the journey with them as they found their place in the world while seeing things in a different way. And then it switched, and it's no longer lauded to see things differently from the status quo. It's a really weird shift, in my opinion. But our society's always had this thing about the odd person, the outsider. That, like, even to a smaller extent, like shows like what is it, The Mentalist, that was on, I think, like 10 years ago. Monk, Tony Shalhoub comedy, the OCD guy that was really good with details and could solve insanely complex murders because of it, but he was just weird and everybody didn't know how to deal with him. That's been in our world forever, but it's had this thought of this person is unique and interesting. And lately it's been, this person is wrong. That they don't see things like we do, so they're wrong. And that's something I've thought about over the last 2 years, actually, when it reached me. But conversations I have with people about these things, or just about regular life stuff, experiences, being 45, talking with my daughter, who's now an adult. I look at the way she responds to things, and I look back at the way that I responded to things at her age, and I'm like, the only reason I get it is because I've been around longer. I have more time to stew on it. She hasn't. She's making this decision right now in the moment, whereas I've got 24 years on her. And that's the only difference in our perspective. And it applies to everyone nowadays. I've found that I have better conversations with people when I look at them as who they are instead of who I think they are.
Well, and that's the key, right? From like a self-identity standpoint. One of my, I butcher the quote, but it's, all of us usually don't live the life we think we should live. We don't live the life others think we should live. We live the life that we think others think we should live.
Yeah. It's like that meme. The what I do, what my friends think I do, what my parents think I do. Yeah.
Exactly.
And what I really do.
Yeah. And we're all trying to, well, a lot of us, until we reach a realization of like, oh man, I'm actually not living my true life. Like, who am I and what life do I want to live? Like those two questions are so powerful if you answer them honestly. Like that's like the one caveat. Like whenever I tell people, like, those two questions, like, who are you and what life do you want to live? Like, start with those two questions, look at yourself in the mirror, and if you are answering those questions and you are not feeling like a visceral response within you, you're not answering honestly.
Right. Yeah.
But I reflect on that quote often. Like, am I living the life that I want to live, the one that God set before me, or am I living the life that I think others think I should be living? And for a long time, it was that, because going back to the whole people pleasing and masks and stuff. But,
yeah, I was gonna say that.
Right.
There's a discordance when you're trying to do things by other people's standards, and you can feel it in your soul. You lay down at night and you're like, why did I do that? why did I answer that way? And you like spend hours just replaying the day's events in your head. Like, why was I, why this, why that? Why didn't I do this? You know, but once you step onto that personal path that's in alignment with who you are, you lay down at night and go, I had a pretty good day. It's a total perspective shift.
Yeah, it's sort of reflected on that. It's, and there's two things that come to mind, and I look at it like, I know I bring up the pills a lot, right? The blue pill, red pill, white pill, black pill.
Still don't get it.
Yeah, it's fine.
People explain it to me all the time. Like,
everyone has that different view of it too. But
I've got guys in the Discord who have been explaining it to me, and they put it in a list in front of me, and I stare at it and go,
"Yeah."
Now, what if you take all the pills and just like, boom, all at the same time? Because I'm kind of with Daniel. Like, I was trying to explain.
That's called overdose, though. We probably
no, but it's not that
multiple personality disorder.
Right? So it's simple. It's really simple. Red pill is just that you look at it through a red lens, right? You don't just buy into the bullshit, right? You kind of like, I have the answers, but there's kind of the arrogance there. I'm going to bring up the chart because I think the chart does it better than me, okay? Because my chart
presentation.
That's it. Yes. I'm going to
Michael's got a pill of PowerPoint.
I'm just going to switch it all around.
So the red pill is like ego driven. Is that what I'm hearing?
I'm gonna share it.
That's what he's saying. Let's see the evidence. Let's go to the tape.
Going to the tape. All right.
I think about it in like the masculine, like from a masculine movement perspective, like the whole toxic masculinity and all that stuff. And in my brain, like the red pill.
This is so.
The red pill is like the toxic masculinity kind of side of things.
Yeah. So I look at red pill, really, it's just at the bottom. It's survival, or it's actually, no, red pill it's like pride, right? So red pill would be pride, right there. Right there.
Right in the middle.
And the blue pill, I mean, how would you look at it on here? It would kind of just be naivety. So I think that's the thing. The red pill and the blue pill are really just, it's naivety. I don't even put it here. But it's red pill and blue pill are really just the same thing, and I look at it like alpha Twitter, alpha, I'm the alpha male. Let's see who can be. It's just pride. But you could also say that blue pill is just fear, right? It's fear of like being your own person. It's and that's why the thought that comes to mind often is the idea of just the negative, ignorant negativity, ignorant positivity, because there's something in me that I just can't stand it. Just there's this fake positivity, and that's what made me connect with, like, I went through my phase with like George Carlin, and there's something just fresh about it. Just like, it's all bullshit. They're all full of shit. There's something so great about the meme. We've all had it in our life, right? Where like maybe you're in a classroom where you just have somebody who just calls out bullshit, and it's just like fresh, right? But you can't live there either, because I think it's also a sense of pride. Look at me. I'm spiritually enlightened, and those other people aren't. So, and I feel bad.
Nihilism's attractive because it's easy. If you don't believe in anything, you don't have to do anything.
Sure.
Facts.
But the conscious positivity, and that's, to me, well, I think actually this chart actually breaks it down really cool. So many people do different variations of it, but like this spiritual paradigm, this is the shift from reason to love, because I think people can be stuck in reason, but you can't reason, and I'm sure you could really appreciate this, right, Daniel, is, being a writer. How do you reason a kid's first steps? Like the beauty of that, like you can, or like a moment in time that why you love somebody. Like you could put reasons into it, but there's.
Oh, you're asking about the transition between love and reason.
Yes.
Okay.
So like, how do you, I think Alan Watts said it really good. Like you pick up a seashell and just look at it. Don't give a million reasons. Like, just appreciate the seashell or the rock or whatever it is, and just appreciate its beauty. Someone who's very logical thinking oftentimes cannot do that.
Mhm.
And that shift from reason, the engineering view of the universe to, or Newtonian kind of physics to, I appreciate this.
I think it requires jumping, at least from the presentation here, the list you have. I think it requires a bit of leaping, and that tracks. They always say a leap of faith is part of being able to embrace love. There's sort of an intrinsic trust in that you will not fall to your death at that point. But using the chart, to me, the child's first step angle, reason, I know why the child's taking their first step now, but it's joy. They've accomplished something that's worth applause, that's worth cheer for. So there's joy in that moment. If there isn't joy in that moment, then you haven't hit an opportunity to experience love, which is the step in between reason and joy. So more I look at this, I see kind of like a hopscotch thing going on.
I love
Shame,
looking at it just different. I look at it from different angles. There's so
starting
many ways
at the
to look at it.
bottom with shame. Shame and apathy go hand in hand constantly, and in between them there might be guilt, but there doesn't have to be guilt. But shame and apathy go hand in hand. Apathy, once you've moved out of that, there's lots of fear. Grief, the grief one I'm not so sure about. It's like a weird crowbar in between the two of them. But once you step out of apathy, when you start to want to feel things, there's a huge amount of fear in that. Like, if I do these things, what's going to happen to me? So is it safer to just stay in the I don't care zone, or do I take the risk, which is fear? And a lot of times fear does jump into anger. So I'm looking at it and I keep seeing these connections in the one above the one that's actually above it. It's weird.
And you made a good point. I think it was like a couple weeks ago, right? And I've really reflected on it. Let's talk. We hit vaccines, so let's talk LGBTQ now, right? It's interesting if you look at the colors, right? Versus if you look at a pride flag, the red is at the top, right? So what's interesting, at least my perspective, and I think I saw it from a couple people on my feeds. You're prioritizing shame and guilt. You're prioritizing your survival aspect. Sexuality becomes the pinnacle. So it's no longer, you're hated because you're gay. It's like, no, pride is literally the pinnacle, which is not our pinnacle. The pinnacle is to deny ourselves. That's the Christian. That's why these two are at odds with each other. To deny ourselves is not pride. And what's interesting, right? Try to peel this back. And to me, this has been it's been like eye-opening, right? Is that the guilt and shame. We've all fallen short of the glory of God. We've all made mistakes. We've all screwed up, right? And some of those run deeper than others, right? Unless you've crossed that line of evil, right? Where I would say it would be children or whatever. May God have mercy on your soul. That's what I would say. And Christ spoke about those types of people. So, but that aside, most of us have screwed up. We fell into the world. And how do you speak? How do you deal with that guilt and shame? With most people are just we live in a very judgmental society. Gossip, Hollywood, all this noise.
Broken, judgmental.
Yeah. And how do you deal with guilt and shame? Well, there's two ways. You double down with pride. You say, this is how you must accept me as I am, or courage. And courage says, I'm wrong. Courage requires humility. Courage requires, that's not just saying I'm wrong, but it's I think humility and pride go like when you sacrifice pride, that takes courage. It takes courage to say I don't have all the answers if you're living as an ego for so long.
Right.
I look back at younger version of me, which is one of the topics I really do want to dive in with you guys. But the moment I said I don't have all the answers, you realize a lot, because I think it takes courage, because also when you do that around someone who knows everything, they will look at that as weakness. But as I continue to
Yes.
grow in that, you get to see who are the people who are going to take advantage of that, and you get to see who are the people who are going to say, hey man, I've screwed up too. And you get to, it's like it's really powerful, because
Yep.
if you double down in pride, then you can't really see that. So there's lots of insights that come up with that. But that was big for me, and I think that's big with the pride thing too, is that's the problem with pride. That's the exact problem, is that you have a society that is loving degeneracy, and it's not just LGBTQ. It's, I would say feminism at heart, at large, and that's, I mean, I can try to peel that back on best I can, so I look forward to doing. But I think it is prioritizing the ephemeral, the feeling good, over what is right. And these are masculine and feminine principles. And I'm not going to do the best way of articulating it. I like the yin and the yang example. But when you flip the when you so shedding pride is to admit that this way is wrong. And that's one of the hardest things to do too, is that to believe that there is a right and a wrong way in a world that says it's my way, that there is not a right way, there is not a standard.
It's interesting. I'll
It's
touch
very,
back on George Carlin for a moment there. He summed it up perfectly with never underestimate the power of stupid people in large groups.
Herd mentality is a powerful psychological phenomena.
Yep. And it's the one thing that is most manipulated in social conditioning.
Yes.
If you can get a small group of people to start behaving one way, you will instantly affect a larger group of people. It's
Yeah.
very
There was
strange.
a study about authority as well. I can't remember where it was done. It was like Stanford or Yale, but it's where this professor that was touted as the authority figure in this particular experiment, there are two groups of people. One was the subject and the other was an actor. And the subjects were to give electrical shocks to the actor when they would answer incorrectly. And short end of it, they got to a point where they listened to the authority figure so much that they were giving like death levels of electrocution, even when the actor got the question correct. And the subjects knew it was correct, but the authority figure said, no, that's incorrect. They would still administer the shocks.
Yeah, they went along with it.
Yeah. So
Yep.
it takes courage. And that map of consciousness is interesting because I do think you can live at two levels at the same time too. Like courage, and I think the other one up there was acceptance. I think that's on there. And yeah, acceptance, which is a little higher up, because I think initially you have to have the courage to say, like, yes, I'm wrong. And then you jump up to acceptance, and under the predominant emotional states, forgiveness. So we were talking about that on the call. It was either this past week or the previous week. And you have to somewhat forgive yourself.
Last one.
Was okay, yeah. You have to forgive yourself for being wrong. And accept, like, okay, one, I don't have all the answers, and be humble enough to always come at it from that state of I don't have all the answers and I can always be wrong. But when you take it from a
You don't have to
valued
mute
and prin-
coughs in here. We can cough. So,
I just don't want to disrupt what
no,
he's
I'm kidding.
saying.
I'm kidding. But go ahead.
you have to forgive yourself in order to. I forgot where I was at.
Way to go, May. Look at this.
Yeah, just derail the conversation. I'm
But-
on your track, I think.
right, go.
One thing I was going to add to that was, in forgiving yourself, you have to come to the realization that it's okay to be wrong.
Yes.
And that's something that I discuss with my daughter all the time now, that she's essentially an adult at 21, is she's so hard on herself. If something doesn't go right, it's like it's all her fault in her head. That's the track that she lets out to me. And my response to that always is, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. If you made a mistake, go find it. If you can't find a mistake, it's just something that went wrong. Doesn't mean that it's your fault. It's okay to make a mistake. It's what you do afterwards. A lot of the world now, and that goes into the pride thing, a lot of the world now sees a mistake as like some sort of little death where you can no longer function in that sphere. Like, I did this wrong once, therefore I can never do it again. Game over, man. When the truth is, it's the most successful people fail constantly.
Yeah,
Overnight successes are paved with a million failures prior to that overnight success.
Oh yeah.
I think of the subconscious, the iceberg, like the underneath, right? The hard work, all that. But he also refers to this because you had mentioned before that it's like, it's not, because when I first saw this, like, oh, I can't wait I get from grief to fear and then desire. And it's like, it's kind of, I just look at it just so differently. That's why I love to just kind of always put it up. But he expresses it that it's basically like you put light through a prism. We're a human being, right? So the full expression of us is this entire chart. Like, it's the rainbow, right? It's like, if you look at it from like a human body perspective, right? I'm sure you've seen like the chakras, right? Those different things. Like, you look on the bottom end, that's our lower nature, right? Our sexual appetite, that is that part, our root nature. And then as you go up, and if you look at it like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? It's the kind of same thing. Your base needs, shelter, physiological, and then psychological, and then, in this phase here, right? It's like, this is where you have this is how you have relationships, right? Like, if you're not a reasonable person, you're not going to have really a lot of relationships, right? Or you're going to have relationships based off survival. Some people don't move up.
Right.
But he had said that it is that's why I love it. I put out a video like on him with drugs, right? That like, when you take drugs, it basically blocks out the survival. So when you first have that first hit of, isn't life grand? I love everybody. You'd be stupid not to do that again, right? So I love his expression of that, right? But the idea is that you short circuited it, and that you didn't overcome the lower self. You temporarily blocked it,
Right.
and then you get to see that which we always are, which is that without all that negative, but we have to overcome that. But the expression is, I think that you can, I think this is like Christ, and this is something that I reflect, that like Christ flipped the tables, right? He was able to use anger, but most people are living in anger, so to be this full expression, right? And I speak about with porn. There's nothing wrong with sex. There's nothing wrong with porn. But if you live here, there's something wrong with porn. There's nothing wrong with sex, right? But there is, if the desire is not rooted in something higher, then you're living as an animal, and it's a bottomless pit. So when it's properly ordered, there's nothing wrong with any of these things. There's nothing wrong with grief, right? There's nothing wrong with, and again, living from it. I could even say guilt and shame, right? These are good things. To your point, Daniel, you have to make a mistake. You should feel guilt and shame. If you hurt somebody, right? You said something wrong to somebody, you should have that sense of guilt and shame and say, oh, thank God I have guilt and shame, because the opposite of that is being a complete psychopath. You don't have
Right.
any of these, like, and that's where that pride aspect is. I don't have guilt and shame. Like, and that's a dark place to be. So
Very dark place to be. And that's why it's so interesting to me that it's right in the middle there.
which one?
Pride.
I do find that intriguing as well. And like when you,
There's more power and pride. That's why people will fall for people who are in positions of like extreme confidence, because I think pride can I reflect that, like, pride can really seem like courage. So if you have most people, if
Yeah.
you see people in apathy and guilt and shame, look at, you're against Black lives. What are you against Black, like, and then just fighting men against women, all this kind of stuff. Then we have someone who's proud, and you keep people in desire, keep them in their base, keep them angry at each other, keep that. And then you have someone of pride, they have all the answers. That if people don't transcend, that's why I think the conscious positivity thing comes in too, because if you don't transcend those lower states, then you'll be manipulated by those. So it's like either pride is your God, or peace, love, joy. I mean, Christ, that's your God, and you only get there, again, I think through humility. I add that.
you have to fail, right? Like, talk to Daniel's point. So we just started homeschooling, and
How's that going?
good. So week 1's in the books, and like I'm loving it so far.
Nice.
There's challenges, of course, but I do try to take it from like, this is a learning experience for both of us, right? So every week is a new milestone. All right, week 1 down, we reach that milestone. On to week 2 tomorrow. So every week's a brand new milestone, and we're both learning each other. He's learning how I am teaching, or how my wife is teaching, and then we're also learning his best learning style. But one of the things that I hope to instill in him that I did not get from regular public education was that fail is not a bad word, because for so many years, decades really, when I would fail, I would just, boom, I would fall straight down to the bottom of that chart every single time.
Yep.
And it would take a very long time to get myself back up, and then I'd fail again, and then it just cycle. And I hope to instill in my boys that when you fail, failure is a beautiful thing, because it shows you that couple things. One, something that you can work on. Two, you push yourself to your max, your current max. And now let's find a solution. So being solution oriented versus problem focused.
Right.
And that's one thing that, as a kid, when I was younger, something that I would tell myself when I was a kid is failure is not a bad word. It's something, it's part of the process to get better. So whether you fall down once or fall down 12 times, get back up and try again. Before you just blindly run into like bull in a china shop, like, that's one thing that I think is missed in this whole like self-improvement space. Like, they always say like, oh, just get back up. It's great, but if you keep hitting your head against the wall, you're eventually, one, you're going to have a traumatic brain injury, and two, you're not going to solve the problem. So like, taking a step back and reviewing what you did and where you can get better at is a often misstep, versus just get back up and keep running, which
Self-reflection.
every once in a while, yes, you get back up and you just keep running, but most of the time we need that self-reflection, that awareness. And that's one of the things, talking about the topic that you wanted to touch on, like something that we would tell ourselves when we were a kid, it's definitely like failure is not a bad word. In order to reach the best version of ourselves, we need to fail. There's no way around it.
Absolutely.
You have to go through the pain.
Yep. And it's some of the issue that we're having with male society in general currently, is that fear of failure creates stagnation. You know, a lot of, in my opinion, may not be true, but in my opinion, a lot of the issues that young men have today are based around not doing. Is we are doing creatures. We want to build things, do things, go places, move things, you know, and we feel most at home doing so. But if your mind is that, okay, I'm going to try to do this thing, okay, I failed, I'm going to go try and do something else. And you keep doing that after X amount of failures, you have not wisdom, which you have, but you're not focused on that. You're focused on the breadth, the list of things that you didn't do. And that is devastating to a person's mind. This is all the things that I didn't do, that I can't do because I didn't do them correctly the first time out.
Yeah.
And we used to get, like, you know, I'm old, it's fine. We used to have guys who would stand there and watch you fail and go, it's fine, keep going. And you try it again. It's fine, keep going. And eventually figure it out. And then you look at them and they're like, yeah, now you understand. That's the reinforcement is missing there. You know, now you're on my level. Now you're like me. And that is probably more powerful than anything anyone could say. Just in that one moment, that look of you have reached a point where you and I now know something together.
Yeah, that's got to be like, it makes me think of the fishermen kind of thing. You know, I think what's the greatest gift a man can give? I really think it's wisdom. You know, to see to the shift from boy into manhood, which is that's the rebirth, to be born again. I think that's what Christ was really sharing with everybody, my heart of hearts. You know, that, and that's essentially freedom, and it's essentially is the complete opposite of what the world is, which is to seek validation and to be liked by other people. Like one of the aspects of it that you find that
We
freedom
chase it
within.
in a corrupted fashion these days.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a part of me that I that's why I bring up that validation a lot, because there was a part of me that I don't want validation at all. And that was kind of a dark place. But I think it was necessary because I had to go through a phase, because I don't I don't like people who just compliment me just for the sake of complimenting. It's like, why? Like I like to understand root motivations. Like, because I realize how the ego works. It's if I make you feel good, then you're gonna make me feel good. And that's how a lot of people are
Social transaction.
yeah. And on a certain level, right, this is where I think the love aspect, right, reason. And I think it was 7 Habits he talks about it. It's like an emotional bank account. I'm not going to sit here and say, well, did you really mean that? And it's like, you know, there's kind of a wisdom that's there, but I kind of zoom out and I say, you know, or you know, where is this coming from? Like, is it, you know, because yeah, think about it's like I'm sure you can see this in the job, right? Like it's like kissing up to the boss, right? This kind of teachers, like that kind of mentality. And I think a lot of relationships are based on that, right? Hollywood, like you make me feel good, make my ego feel, I'll make your ego feel good. And then it becomes the relationship of that core becomes, well, you're not making me feel good. Well,
Right.
you know, and it's like this is like my dad my dad calls it as, you know, two half people. Well, if the one half you have one half and another half, it's like it's not going to work because they're, you know, you have to become whole. You know, and a
Right.
whole person, it's like, you know, and this is where that wisdom comes in, because you're not let's say if your wife's in a bad mood, right? You're not going to, it doesn't mean you're going to be like Mr. Positive, right? So there's going to be an effect, on a certain end, but that you have the ability to not be always pulled into everyone else around you. If everybody else around you is in a bad mood, doesn't mean you're in a bad mood. Might be inclined to, right? If you're in a bad mood environment, right? It doesn't mean that doesn't affect it, but it doesn't have that same power kind of thing.
It's very challenging. And
sure.
because black holes are infinitely magnetic, like, and that's what
And all consuming.
And all consuming, exactly. And that's kind of the way I look at people that are in that particular state of mind, anger, fear, just in a bad mood. And it's very, very easy to get sucked into that. But that's when having that awareness and that ability to self-reflect, which a lot of people don't like to do because the mirror is very revealing. So they avoid it with every fiber in them. And it's realizing you are in control of your thoughts. Well, there's argument to that. Like some people will say thoughts just pop in, but you are in control of how you respond to your thoughts.
True.
And it's
Jim Rohn, stand guard at the door of your mind.
Yeah, I mean, our mind is our most powerful tool.
Yep.
I'm sure like all three of us can agree with that. Like it's you are the gatekeeper, and you also hold the keys to all the areas that greatness is hiding behind. And no one, and I don't know if it's just because there's lack of permission. I know for me, like it was the fear of failure, but we all hold the freaking keys, man. Like we just need to unlock those doors and like be you. That's another thing that I would tell my younger self is like, be you. Don't stop being what everybody else wants you to be. Like, just be you. Be Jonathan. And that, talking from the previous topic, like the being unique, when we're so focused on being unique, no one's unique. Because everyone's so focused on being different that no one is different.
Yeah.
It's the Sneetches, man.
All right, you're gonna have to elaborate on that one.
The Dr. Seuss did a story called about these creatures. They were upright duck type humanoids, and this dude comes to town with a machine, and he says, "I can make you special by manufacturing a star that we can put on your belly." And he starts with one, and that one starts running around, and the rest of them look at it and go, "Oh wow, that's really cool." So they all sign up and pay their money to this guy, and they all get stars on their bellies, and then it's not cool anymore. So the guy is like, "Well, if you want to be unique, I can take the star off of your belly for this much," and the process starts all over again. So that whenever that comes up, that's the first thing I think. It's the Sneetches, man. It's all about that being unique until everybody's unique, and then no one is unique.
That's introverts, extroverts. Another way I think about it, introvert, extrovert, shining, right? Like the lighthouse analogy. That's why I love the lighthouse analogy. Or personality based into character. That's the one that keeps coming to my mind too, because personality is the same thing. It's like, look at my personality. It's personality, right? TV personality. Look at me. Look at me. Look how special I am. It's like trying to get that. But when you're that lighthouse, when you're character based, it's internal. It's how can I please God, which is how can I please the highest version of me? What is, and that's an internal process. And when you're competing against that, right? How can I be better than I am yesterday? Things that we covered today. How can I be willing to make mistakes? Hey, I'm willing to look like a fool because it's not against me, against other people. Who's the fool, really? It's like I'm the fool for 5 minutes, but long term, I'm wise. So to be able to play the game against your lower self, the negative mind, or end the growing internally, that's character based versus personality. It's trying to fit in and be liked, and you might find be liked by people, but I always think of Gladiator. It's like, this is why I really reflect on the validation aspect too. It's like, it may be cold and dark parts of it, but not doesn't necessarily equate to all of it. It's like you find the right people at the right time. And you look at Gladiator, I think it's the greatest thing, because even as a man who's following his principles, he's also playing the game where he meets the old school Gladiator, the guy who has the slaves. And he says to him, win the crowd and you'll win your freedom. So it's there's levels to this. So but he wins the crowd by following his principles, and he's his own man. So he's not seeking validation from the crowd, but he is at the same time. This is where the paradox comes in. And
I wouldn't say he is at the same time. I think maybe the philosophical point of that is that chasing validation isn't going to get you what you want. Becoming who you are gathers validation from those around you. Because that was sort of the point. If he had pandered to the crowd and just done as he was told to do, they may have cheered, but he never would have achieved anything other than being a murdering gladiator. But stepping beyond that, the people cleaved to it, so they gave him validation without him actually seeking it.
Yes.
Don't chase, just be.
So good. Like they say kill, and then he leaves them to live, and then they're like, Maximus the Merciful, and then you see the lady's like, I can't do anything. Like it just he's totally like, it's disobedience, but it's courage. It's the highest. It's such a great movie, man.
Well, like Daniel said though, it's him being him.
Right.
Yeah. Be you.
Unapologetically.
Unapologetically. And it's when we were talking about submission when I was on your podcast, Mike, like it's, you don't force it. You live a life that people want to follow. Like you don't tie them up and chain them and say, okay, come on, submit.
Yeah.
By your examples. And that's why I think leading by example and like being the lighthouse is so important, because words are important, the things that we say are important, but our actions are even more important, because there's social media, and it's just more, I don't even want to say it's more prevalent now, it's just more in our face. A lot of people say they'll do particular things, but when the tires meet the road, they're not there.
And I would say even too, repetitive actions, because of that quote, thoughts become words, words become actions, actions become habits, habits become character, character becomes destiny. So the reason I bring that up is because even when I hear the word act, right, it's like it's an act, right? And if people can be fooled just by actions, like, and that's something I can do something, and like, oh, look how he did that, right? It's like you could see a president, like, look, he's over there, he did that action, right? Like, oh, he cares about the people because he did this action, right? Like, so that's the whole game, is that we have to be real. It's character, personality can take action. That's the point I'm making.
Action without intention.
Yeah.
Yeah, you lost me for a minute, but now I got it.
And well, yeah,
I was lost for a second too.
That's the scowl. I was like, wait, where's he going with this?
And consistent action, because consistent action would be that intention, because the intention pulls you to do the consistent action.
Right.
And the reason I say that is because it's like, I think of like, I'm going to talk about relationships a lot as this goes on, but like, the classic, like, well, he bought me flowers, so he must like me.
Yeah.
Right. So the action appears good. Look at what's the confusion? He did something nice for me. This is how I think a lot of people operate.
Yes.
Where it's in a state where it's like, look, well, he did nice things. Now he did a nice action, so the action is good. So it's to remove that. It's to go back to God cares about our heart, not the things that we do. Like, in a sense, right? It's like that's where at least I get the idea of that. and again, is paradoxical. Don't go out and see your righteous acts. Don't be looking to be seen for your righteous acts.
Mhm.
So you can do righteous acts, but that doesn't make
Yeah.
you a righteous person. That's
Yeah,
the
agreed.
core of it.
The
I probably just said it
confusion
like that.
there was because the example, something I think about a lot. The example was he bought me flowers, so he must like me. Well, that's you're coming from the perspective of the receiver, who is then making an assumption on the giver. So there's two totally separate angles involved in that, in your example. If a person that you would be like, let me see, if you were the giver of the flowers, you could give flowers to a random person on the street that was walking by just because you felt like it. That would be your reason, just because you wanted to. You give them to your girlfriend. Could be because you did something wrong and you're trying to make up. Could be because you're just feeling romantic. There's multiple
Yeah, no, you
reasons.
nailed it. You nailed it with the intention. Yeah.
Yeah,
The
there's
intent. Yeah.
multiple reasons to do so. The example that you gave, that was the reason why I gave you that look, was because it
Yeah.
was like, this is coming from the receiver. So the receiver is making an assumption based on what they want.
Yeah.
And therefore putting it on the giver. If in the example of walking down the street and you hand somebody a flower randomly, it would be a wild assumption for that person to get the flower and go, oh wow, that person must really like me. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
they don't even know you.
Yeah.
So it'd be a wild assumption to do that.
Yeah, and I think it's the reason. It's the shift. Yeah, it's, hey, you know what? Go back. Boom. Let's go. The shift from reason to love, right? This is another one of the things I look at with this is conditionality versus unconditionality. Unconditional love doesn't make sense from a certain perspective. It doesn't make sense to have. Why
Why
would
don't you
they?
explain that one?
Yeah, why would they crucify Christ? So it doesn't. It like turn the cheek doesn't make sense. Eye for an eye makes sense. You do something wrong to me, I'm going to do something wrong to you. Punishment, right? But and again, there's different levels to this, right? Like if someone's like going out murdering people, it doesn't mean like, all right, just let them keep like, right? So, but the unconditional love, it doesn't make sense. It's to the mind, the thinking, the logical, logical mind is what, it's like a businessman, right? Like I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this for you, I'm going to get this. Unconditional is how can I give? How can I continue to give? I love The Giving Tree. That's one of my favorite books. I don't know. It's like, it's how can I continue to give? And that's not something, because to the mind, it's like you give, you give, you give. Well, how can I get? It takes tremendous, you have to go deeper and deeper within to tap into that well where it's just like, no, it's not personal. I'm going to keep giving because they're not, it's an internal way of seeing. It's not something that you like ought to do. It's a way of seeing. That's why I think I look at like forgiveness. Forgiveness is not something you ought to do. That's like a tweet I've put out a few times. Forgiveness is not something you ought to do. It's a way of seeing. So Christ forgave because he saw that people were fighting themselves. Whereas oftentimes, it goes back to even what you were saying with the submission, right? It's like it's not it's it's force. This is the whole thing, right? In this chart, it's all force is down here. Force is pride down, and power is it's courage to follow yourself, right? Courage in your convictions. It was be said that that you don't. It's a way of seeing. When you're in that, that's how you become an attractive person. Versus pride says I have to, I have to appeal to other people. I have to be seen as a certain way. I can't look bad. Whereas courage and power says, I don't care if I look bad, and that actually is power. That's attractive. You don't want to be around people who like, do you like me? Do you think I did the right thing? Like constantly seeking validation.
It's being an attractive person without seeking to be an attractive person.
Yeah. Which is a way of
So,
seeing. And I
Right.
think it would be actually be more powerful to say this is where the part of owning your weaknesses,
Yeah.
sacrificing pride. That's why I often say it's like, there's parts of me that I want to die. There's parts of me that I see, right? Like, oh, there's selfish Mike. We had a talk a couple weeks ago where I was like, you had said to me, Daniel, you said there's a sense of desperation, you said to me. That's cool. That's cool because 3 years ago, I'd be like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. But now I can look at it and go, oh, okay, that's desperate. So I can look at these parts of me that are there and it's just like,
I
oh,
admit I was waiting for the cue, Daniel.
yeah. But that's the thing. It's like, that's what's so fun about this is that you can actually say, oh, that's the selfish part of me coming. Like you can kind of like look at, it's like the Gollum inside of us, right? We're just like precious. I got to hold on to like that ego.
Yep.
And you can get like, we can see that come out and like, oh, here's apathy. Here's these parts. Where's this part? We can look at it together, and in a sense, not tolerate it. And like I say in a sense, and that's what's so hard is like, how do you say this is the right way, thy way, this is the right way to live? Well, that's why it was really a trip to make the no sex before marriage video, because who the hell am I? I'm a hypocrite, but I get it. And it's like, there is a right way, and it doesn't mean, and there's so many layers to it, right? Because someone who had sex before marriage, for example, does that mean their relationship can't work? Absolutely not. There's plenty of people who didn't have sex, right, before marriage, and they got divorced. But I would say that leading from the idea that, again, it's purpose over pleasure. When I would argue that the correlation is that those who prioritize relationships of purpose over pleasure are more likely to be successful. That's probably how I would phrase it. Those who prioritize pleasure over purpose are less likely to be successful. Why? Because it's the animal. It's the you make me feel good, I'm going to make you feel good. Well, what happens when I don't? Then it's a bottomless pit. It's that black hole.
Right.
You're operating out of rather, reason and integrity on this chart, right? Like the willingness to go through bullshit. There's going to be a lot of times in relationships that, going to be sick. There's going to be kids. There's going to be all these problems that, it's not about validation.
I would say all relationships start off in pleasure and then hopefully grow into purpose.
Yes.
Right? Because there's that initial attraction.
Yep. First step is always attraction.
Correct. And so it starts in pleasure and then ideally grows into purpose and not just stays in pleasure. And that purpose is like having that mission statement as a couple. And one of the things that I see is in relationships, they try to grow as one unit and not right and not appreciate that you guys they are two separate beings that are on their own separate paths.
Yeah, and Michael was talking about that.
And my job as a husband is to support my wife on her individual path and watch her grow into her beauty and watch her grow into her greatness. And likewise, she does the same thing with me. And with a common mission of becoming our best selves, so then we can come together and be our best selves together for our kiddos.
Very true. Yeah, Michael touched on that earlier with the actually, I think it was your dad that said the two halves trying to make one whole. Yeah, that's it right there. And like, if you look at it like, I'm getting hungry, so forgive me. If you look at it like pizza, if you got two halves of a pizza, you put them together, you've got one whole pizza. So everybody in that paradigm gets to eat from one whole pizza. But if you have two whole pizzas, even if one whole pizza falls off the table, you still got a whole pizza.
Yeah.
And that makes having two whole beings then both benefit from having a whole being in times of crisis, but in times of peace, they've got twice as much.
That's a
There, I
great
coughed
analogy.
on Mike.
Yeah, I love diving into this chart though. I mean, I'm definitely gonna be using this a lot because I think again I mean this is literally everybody. This is everybody. I don't care who you are. I know for a fact you guys have experience like
No,
this is your experience. This chart, right? And that's the thing is that there's no, I want to be able it's so hard to do it because Christ called people out of sin, not to live in sin, right? Like if you have this is the ability to speak the truth to your friends is the best. That's what makes a friend. When your friend
Mhm.
is like what you said before, right? It's like Daniel, like if you're wrong, like it's okay to be wrong, but it's not okay to stay there, right? And
Right.
and how do you tell somebody this is wrong? And I think that's what's happening in society, right? With this LGBTQ and the push and left versus right, there's different layers to this, right? And this is where you see like the Westboro Baptist Church. Why does the media focus on that? Because then you have God hates fags, right? When you see God hates fags, what is that? What kind of message is that? Is that Christ? Would Christ be sitting there with a sign saying God hates fags? I don't think so. I think he'd be sitting with people and connecting with them and calling them out of sin, right? And that's where you have to be able to look at. It's hard to say that, right? That's why I think the only way that you can is through humility and sharing your own hypocrisy and sharing your own experience and where you've been wrong, sharing your sins, But also, again, there's just so much, because if I bring up porn, right? There is more power in the statement, don't watch porn. There's more power in the statement, I've struggled with porn. This is what I've learned, and this is why I don't watch porn anymore, versus don't watch porn. In other words, if I tell people stop watching porn, don't watch porn, it's bad, there's less power in that. Because if you're in that addiction, it's like telling an alcoholic, stop drinking alcohol, essentially. That's probably a better example. So there's more power in saying, in connecting. And that's where I think that's where the reason and love kind of thing comes in too. A loving person sits with somebody. He doesn't care. You said it before too, Daniel, right? It's like meeting people where they're at, not assuming.
Yep.
Not assuming. You get to listen, express yourself. This is who, this is where I'm at. This is my struggles, right? And then looking for that opportunity to say, it's wrong though, right? You're in the wrong here, right? Looking for the opportunity to say, there is essentially accountability and forgiveness. If you don't have both of those ingredients, you're not living right, in my view.
Can see
And
that.
we have a lot of the forgiveness aspect and acceptance, right? This overly tolerant society. So
There's a lot of it's like I said, it's corrupted. It's not what the intention isn't correct in acceptance and forgiveness. The intention of forgiveness is, to my mind anyways, someone's wronged you and they apologize, you give them the opportunity to correct the wrong by saying, okay, I forgive you now. The onus is on you to do better from that point forward. The corrupted version of forgiveness is, I did something wrong and you say, okay, fine.
Yeah.
And there's no expectation that the person is supposed to correct the mistake at that point. It's just we move on now.
But it's interesting. I would push back on that, right? Because the expectation, and this is where the paradox comes in, because the expectation is because in true state of love, you don't expect anything from anybody.
Think so?
I do.
I'm gonna hit you with the Christianity here. You think Jesus didn't have expectations for anyone?
He wanted. That's the paradox. So you expect that you expect if he
Yeah, see?
I know that's why it's hard to, because I understand your point, and I also
Mhm.
I would say mine too. It's like
Yeah,
when I work out, right? If I want people to be in shape, I don't. The worst thing I can do is expect people to follow me. I guess that's probably the angle I'm coming from.
I think the worst
That
thing is you force people. Sorry to interrupt, but the worst thing
yeah,
is you force people to follow you,
right.
expecting. I don't think is a bad thing actually.
No, the expectation is internal in this particular one, where you're talking about an external expectation, where there's some sort of consequence that
yes,
happens. Naturally, there will be a consequence to, say, forgiving someone who then does the thing again, and that's where I wanted to point out earlier. You said the talking about your hypocrisy and your experience, and the fact that you link the two of those things together was really interesting to me, because I have fundamental issues with the concept of hypocrisy. um, and I think it's because of my perspective with that. So when you forgive someone, you still have an expectation that they're not going to do the thing again. If somebody punches you in the face and then says, "I'm sorry, I was just really angry," then you have a choice there. You can either go, "No, I don't want to be hit in the face again," and walk away, or you can say, "Okay, I forgive you. I don't forget that you just punched me in the face, and I expect you to not do that again." And if they do, that's a conscious choice on their decision. And that to me would be hypocrisy in a nutshell. But like saying I struggled with these things and I did these things, I experienced these things, and I have wisdom to share, that's not hypocrisy to me.
I think you nailed it, like the internal expectation.
Right. The external expectation is that the person who's apologizing is expecting to be free to do whatever the heck they want afterwards.
I have to sit with it. I think it's because I think it ties in with turn the cheek too. Because I think again this ties in. This is the shift from reason to love.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've heard it said before. That's why I put out a tweet. Actually, it's cool that we're talking about this because I put out a tweet. The ex, manage expectations and expect the unexpected. That was the best way that I can put them together, right? Because again, with shifting into love, it's hard to articulate it because on a certain level you have no like I've heard people say I don't expect anything from anybody. People let me down all the time, all that. And then I've also heard people say the opposite where it's like, yeah, you have to manage expectations, right? Like you should go.
Weird, just weird way that came into my head when you said it. If you had no expectations, how can someone let you down?
They can't. If you honestly have zero expectations,
Zero
then
expectations would be apathy. You don't give a
yeah,
crap. So
you would
no
just
one can
be
let you
walking
down.
around stone faced,
Yeah.
See, that's the
stone
thing.
feeling.
That's why it's so hard to really articulate this, right? Because that's why I said the psychopath aspect of the like where you don't care what other people think. That's no expectations.
Right.
So on one level, it's cold. I don't care what anybody thinks at all. I'm disconnected from any human emotion. The other one says it. I don't care how other people think of me because I understand they're fighting themselves. It's a higher level of understanding. It's hard as fuck to get there. That's why it's hard as hell for me to really express it because I'm not there myself. So I would default to you and I would agree with you.
And one of the things that I am
But it's like a matter
constantly
of the
working
heart to
towards
express. But
Mm-hmm.
is like you accept life as it is, but you're working towards the life you desire. And
working towards
it
what?
the life you desire,
Yeah.
the life you want. And it's accepting life as it is. That's one of the hardest things we can do, because everyone's going through something, and to have that empathy to realize that. We talk about the cutting off in traffic a lot, cutting off while we're driving a lot. Like, you don't know what that person is going through. Like, might be rushing to the hospital, might be.
But to
like,
Daniel's
work.
point, you expect there's a certain type of expectation that people are going to follow the rules and the law, right? Like, so they're driving
Exactly.
like crazy.
Yeah.
You know?
That's why I stopped you, because in that, if you truly don't care, you have no expectation, which means you have no expectation that other people are going to follow the law. You have no expectation that people are going to hear what anyone says. You have no expectation that they're going to act in any way whatsoever. You're completely blank, which is untrue.
That's why it's so
No
hard
one
to
is
express the
completely
loving
blank.
aspect. The best I think it just comes to mind is the prodigal son, the father giving up his inheritance to his son, right? You would expect your son to go the right way, but it's trusting the no expectations. It's not a cold. I would say that there's a warm no expectations. That's probably the best way. There would be a warm no expectation. In the moment, you would expect your son to be wise with his money and not leave home and go out into the world. But there's a trust. There's a high. It's coming from a no expectation trust, not a no expectation lack of trust, not a cynical no expectation. Again, it's harder to get to. This is I look at this chart so much because it's like with Christ knew that, and maybe we can go peel this back, push back on me on this, because again, I'm going into uncharted territory here. Christ knew that Peter would deny him 3 times.
True.
He accepted him as the end. Now, you would expect that he would have a disciple that would follow him all through, not deny him at all. But to expect from other people that's where I think the expectation is, that if Christ wasn't loving, he wouldn't. That would be an aspect of no expectations. You're meeting people where they're at. Again, I think it's hard to articulate because it's a matter of the heart. But I do fully agree with what you're saying, that it can absolutely be apathy. And that's why I put out that quote: neutrality is often disguised as apathy, or apathy is often disguised as neutrality, because a truly neutral person, someone who's neutral, is willing to look at both sides. We started this conversation talking about the vaccines, right?
Yeah.
People who, to me, a reasonable person, I can sit with someone who is for the mask and for vaccine and all that, and share their view, if they're willing to say if there's possibility that I could be wrong here. But if there's no possibility, there's no question, then there's no conversation at that point. I can be willing, I voted for Trump. I can be willing to listen to someone who's completely against Trump and say, okay, well, why would they do something? And then we can have a great conversation. But someone's like, Trump bad, this bad, it's like, it's okay. We can't have a conversation then. That's fine. So, but the apathy and neutrality, I think that was a revelation. That's why I bring that up all the time, because it's like, yeah, because neutrality says, what's the best way moving forward? Hey guys, help. What do you think the best way? And I listen to your different views. Apathy is like, there's no way.
Right.
There's nothing I can do. Yeah. And they
Well,
often rhyme.
There's a time and place because a lot of people live in that false dichotomy, right? Like, you can have both. You can have expectations, then you can not have expectations. Like, it doesn't have to be like, I always expect this of people. Sometimes you just go in a situation and you just accept life as it is, and it's just like, all right, let's see what happens. I do that a lot at work, where I don't know what I'm walking into. I walk in, assess the situation, and then I act or respond, right? So it's not either or, it's both. And I gotta hop off, guys.
Yeah.
So it was lovely talking to you guys as always.
Likewise.
Yep.
I'll see you next time.
Thank you, Jonathan.
John. could wrap up here too. We have been going
Sure.
for 2 hours. So we
We'd
usually
probably
do,
go all day if we wanted to.
for sure. But I think it's a good place to close out on the expectations, because I think I did. Are we on agreement on that as far as the expectations? Like where it's
I'm
like,
gonna have to think about it. Like,
yeah,
definitely sit with it because it's still a little hard for me to see, and I think there's something that's missing. Like I feel
Yeah.
like there's something that's missing, so I'm gonna think it through, and you and I will definitely be
Yeah.
talking about it at a later date.
no, but
Maybe back on Life Talks Live again.
for sure. I want to do this weekly, but yeah, again, because I think it's so hard to express those matters of the heart, because yeah, it's because you have to live the paradox, and if you're not living the paradox, then it's the false self. It's to
Yeah.
your point, it is, I have no expectations of everybody, and you can tell the difference. Yeah, I think, it's like, I don't care what anybody thinks, and that kind
There's
of
your
falsehood.
tagline, by the way.
What's that?
Live the paradox.
Live the paradox. Yeah, like that. So, any closing thoughts? Where can people find your stuff? I see you have the website on there.
Oh yeah. If you want help writing, if you are interested in even writing that is personal, I do work with some people who just like to form their thoughts in diaries and personal records, logs, all kinds of different ways. But if you want help getting your thoughts out of your head onto paper or a document, you can reach out to me at whimsyland.org, or you can find me at Mr. DP Riley on the platform formerly known as Twitter.
Now X.
Yep.
Well, thanks for
I'm
joining
giving
me.
it the Prince treatment just because it's funny.
The Prince treatment?
Yeah. The
Prince
artist
treatment?
formerly known as Prince. Now it's the
Prince.
platform
Got it.
formerly known as Twitter.
Got it. But yeah, I appreciate you joining me, Daniel, and as always, appreciate
Happy
you
to be
pushing
with you.
back, because we are on that same path, which is truth. What is true, and letting
Yes.
our bad ideas die. It's part of my mission. So thanks for having me. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Those who tuned in, appreciate you.
Have a great Sunday.